Hello, I am Sarah Glaz, Emeritus Professor of Mathematics at the University of Connecticut. The talk that I will present today, is based on a paper that I published last year in the Mathematical Intelligencer, Enheduanna, Princess, Priestess, Poet, and Mathematician. The paper on which this talk is based brings together a variety of poems written in ancient Mesopotamia that allow us to understand the origins of mathematics in its historical, social, and cultural context. Mesopotamia's poetic output includes the work of the first recorded author in history, Enheduanna, high priestess of the moon god Nana and daughter of King Sargon. Enheduanna temple hymns that touch on mathematics are the focus of my paper. The talk will cover a small part of the paper, including my translation of Enheduanna's temple hymn number 42. Through this poem's prism, I will briefly highlight the aspects of Mesopotamian mathematics reflected in the lines of Enheduanna poetry, as well as touch on her possible involvement in the mathematical activities of her day. Mesopotamia refers to the fertile plain between the Tigris and the Euphrates rivers, situated around the region of present-day Iraq, like the map above shows. The region was the center of successive civilizations in the Neolithic period. The Sumerian civilization flourished in the region around 305,000 BC. This was an advanced society building cities and fortification and supporting agriculture, trade, and city life. Writing was invented by the Sumerian around 300-500 BC. It consisted of cuneiform sign imprinted with a sharpened reed on soft clay tablets, which are hardened when baked in hot kilns. In 2334 BC, the Akkadian king Sargon captured the region, starting a dynasty and founding the first empire in the world. The Sumerian Akkadian civilization lasted till around 2000 BC, when the region came under the rule of a new nation, the Babylonians. The Babylonian Empire declined in the 2nd century BC. Among the fascinating artifacts found in the extensive excavation carried out in the region was a calcite disc dated around 2300 BC from the Sumerian city of Ur, which introduced the world to the remarkable figure of Enheduanna. She is here third from the right, high priestess of the moon god Nana and daughter of King Sargon of Akkad. Religion was central to the Mesopotamian, and as intermediaries between the gods and the people, the priests were in position of power and responsibility. Enheduanna's appointment as high priestess of the moon god Nana, patron deity of the ancient city of Ur, was a political maneuver made by her father in order to enable her to meld the Sumerian gods and the Akkadian gods and create the stability his empire required. The N in her name signifies her position as high priestess. Hedu means ornament and Anna means of heaven. This was the name she assumed as her appointment as N priestess, and the only name by which we know her. Enheduanna continued in this position for over 40 years, spanning the reign of several Akkadian kings and attaining semi-divine status upon her death. Today, she is best known for her literary output, several long poems and a collection of 42 shorter pieces called collectively the Temple Hymns. In these works, Enheduanna distinguishes herself as a poet, not only by creating verses of beauty and power, but also by departing from the customarily anonymous writing tradition of her time and identifying herself as the author of her own verses. The old Akkadian period during which Enheduanna lived and composed her poetry, was a time of transition in the development of Mesopotamian mathematics. Its beginnings lay in the almost proto-mathematical stage of metrological numeration system, and its ending heralded the adoption of the sexagesimal place value number system and the flourishing mathematics of the Babylonian period. As a result, Enheduanna's poetry is in a unique position to mirror the driving forces behind the transition, reflecting the attitude, the motivation, and the need that brought on the transition, as well as providing a glimpse of future developments. I will start by reading my translation of Enheduanna's Temple Hymn 42. Oh, Ezagin, house of lapis lazuli, bright like the stars of heaven, welcoming shrine in Eresh. All primeval lords look up to you every month. The great Nanikbal, Nisaba, brought down divine powers from heaven and added them to your own. Set up your sanctuary ready for praise. The true woman of unsurpassed wisdom, who cools the brows of the black-headed people, consults a tablet of lapis lazuli, dispenses counsel to all lands. True woman, pure as a sopwort, sprout of the holy reed, she measures the heavens above and stretches the measuring cord on the earth. Nisaba be praised. The compiler of this tablet, Enheduanna, my lord, that which had been created here, no one has created before. 14 lines for the house of Nisaba in Eresh. Enheduanna Temple Hymn 42 is the last in a series of short hymns composed to various major temples of Mesopotamian deities. The hymn is dedicated to Ezagin, house of lapis lazuli, the temple of the goddess Nisaba in the city of Eresh. Nisaba was the Sumerian goddess of writing and mathematical calculation, patron goddess of learning and creative intellectual achievements in the arts, sciences, and literature. Her major temple was in Eresh, a city whose location remains unknown, but she was worshipped in the temples of other gods as well. The last 7 lines of Temple Hymn 42 include a description of the role and responsibility of the true woman, which is the goddess Nisaba, Enheduanna herself, or both, a point I will touch on at the conclusion of this talk. The descriptions start by presenting the true woman's wisdom and his role as interpreter of knowledge written on tablets of lapis lazuli. And cool the brow may mean heal the ill, an activity that was known to be held at temples. The black-headed people is a name by which the Sumerian called themselves. Next, it refers to the true woman as having successfully gone through purification rites and become as pure as the plant from which soap is made, soapwort. It also describes her as being born, sprouting from the reed, the holy plant out of which the writing implement was made. Lines 12 and 13 describe the true woman's role as a mathematician. We will address these 2 lines in more detail shortly. A 2-line signature where Enheduanna states that she is the author of the 42 temple hymns is added at the end of the hymn. We now begin to unravel the connection between Mesopotamian mathematics and Temple Hymn 42 with a brief discussion about numbers. Mesopotamian mathematics started with the development of a number system with which arithmetic became possible. This was preceded by a long period of time when numbers were associated with the gods and were used extensively in divination. In particular, 7 was an important number for the Sumerians. In Sumerian religion, the most powerful and important deities, the one who decreed the fates, were the group of 7 gods: Anu, sky, Enlil, air, Enki, water, Ninhursag, earth, Nana, moon, Utu, sun, and Inanna, planet Venus. At least 10 different numeration systems were in use in Mesopotamia after 3500 BC. Around 2000 BC, the region adopted a standard numeration system that was particularly conducive to arithmetic operation, and which became the driving force behind the Babylonians' mathematical achievements, the sexagesimal place value number system. Mathematical tablets found at various excavation sites in Mesopotamia include extensive table of fractions, reciprocals, square roots, and more. At the height of the Babylonian period, we encountered tablets that show ability to solve linear equations, system of linear equation, quadratic equation, and special cases of cubic equation, as well as extract roots. Particularly fascinating is the Old Babylonian tablet YBC 7389, the figure above, dated circa 1700 BC, that exhibit a very high approximation of the square root of 2. Enheduanna temple hymns were written over 100 years before the sexagesimal place value number system was adopted as the standard for calculation. But it is hard to point out the exact time the system started gaining in popularity. The numbers appearing in Enheduanna's temple hymns reflect their mystical past as well as their mathematical future. Several of Enheduanna temple hymns contain numbers. Predominant among those is the number 7. A lovely example appears in the temple hymn dedicated to Ina, House of Heaven, the temple of Inanna, the goddess of love and war, in Uruk. Ina, house of 7 corners, 7 fires lit at nightfall, 7 flames of desire. Number 7 is also evident in the organization of Enheduanna's temple hymns, and in particular, 7 plays a role in the structure of temple hymn 42. The number of lines in temple hymn 42 is 14, which is 2 times 7. The first 7 lines address the temple, and the last 7 lines describe the role and responsibility of the true woman. The number of the hymn itself is a multiple of 7. Other numbers are everywhere evident as well. Each hymn ends with a line count. It is in connection with the count of lines of the temple hymn that we encounter an early, perhaps a first, instance of the sexagesimal place value number system in Mesopotamian literature. Following the last hymn in the collection appears the following inscription, whose transliteration is incipit unir. The count of lines is altogether 8. The word incipit means that the first word in the collection of the hymn is unir. The second line totals the number of lines in the collection and find it is 8. Words in square brackets were inserted in transliteration. Using the sexagesimal place value number system without a notation for 0, we need to guess by the context if the total is 8, 8 times 60, 8 times 60 square, etc. The choice is clearly 8 times 60, which is 480 lines. Unfortunately, this total cannot be verified, as some hymns are missing lines, and at least one hymn was added at a later period. But regardless, the stunning early encounter with the sexagesimal place value number system is quite amazing. Line 12 of Enheduanna Temple Hymn 42 describe one of the activities that the true woman was engaged in as a mathematician. She measures the heavens above. This refers to time reckoning, an activity that was very much connected to the sky. The sky was the heavens above, both the home and the actual body of the sky god Anu and his divine progeny. The most important celestial body for ancient time reckoning was Anu's grandson, god Nana the moon. The Mesopotamian calendar was primarily lunar. Each month began with the first sighting of the new crescent moon, just after sunset on the western horizon. As a result, each month was either 29 or 30 days long, and the year was approximately 354 days. Ritual celebration and agricultural events follow the season, and thus were solar in nature. The solar year length is 365 days, and intercalary months were added when necessary to reconcile the lunar and solar year. It took till about 380 BC to standardize the intercalation practices. Before that, calendars and dates of festival differed from city to city. It was the task of the priesthood in each city to recommend calendar adjustment, to observe and record new moon appearances and calculate as well as predict celestial events such as equinoxes, eclipses, comets, etc., all of which were viewed as signs from the gods. The practice of astronomy and the closely related practice of astrology was secret and conducted by the temple mathematicians, who were members of the priesthood trained in the arts of mathematics and divination. They engaged in extensive celestial observation, calculation, and record keeping in the elevated privacy of the ziggurats. A ziggurat, figure above, which was part of every temple complex, consisted of a massive stepped pyramid on whose top rested the Holy of Holies, the chamber of the god or goddess who was worshipped at that temple. The ancient city of Ur, established around 4000 BC, was the seat of the major temple to the moon god Nana, Ekishnogal, house of great light, where Enheduanna presided as high priestess. Echoes of Ur's calendrical activities are found in Enheduanna temple hymn dedicated to Ekishnogal. After addressing the city of Ur, the hymn addresses the temple complex, describing the activities taking place in each of its parts. In particular, the hymn turns its attention to the Jipar, a cluster of several buildings in which the high priestess had her quarters. In the Jipar, the priestess quarters shining like the sun, your princely shrine of pure divine powers marks the passage of days. The Jipar, shining like the sun, meaning purified and adorned for celebration, contains the princely shrine of pure divine powers, which marks the passage of days. This suggests that astronomical observation or calculation, probably involving the behavior of the moon and the sun, were done in the priestess quarters, either by Enheduanna herself or at least under her supervision. The hymn itself describes a great celebration that took place in the temple complex in the city of Ur. And in the process, the hymn implies that it was Enheduanna's responsibility to keep track of the days for those holidays through astronomical observation and calculations. Astronomical observation carried out in ancient Mesopotamia were mainly geared toward reading the will of the gods. Nevertheless, they formed a solid foundation on which both the calendar and mathematical astronomy, which began being practiced in the region towards the end of the Babylonian period, were developed. The moon received most of the attention, but many other celestial objects that could be viewed with an unaided eye were carefully observed and their behavior recorded. The ancient sources provided an increasingly more scientific and accurate picture of the astral bodies' movement in relation to each other. And about the beginning of the 5th century BC, there appeared the first great Babylonian mathematical astronomer whose name and calculation had survived, Nabu Rimani, son of Balazzo, descended of and himself a priest of the moon god, Nana. Line 13 of Enheduanna Temple Hymn 42 describes the second activity that the true woman was engaged in as a mathematician. She stretches the measuring cord on the earth. This activity refers to mathematical measurements done here on earth. Those included various construction and engineering projects, which involve both planar and spatial geometry, as well as required the ability to lay down and measure a straight line. The latter was done by stretching a cord. Therefore, those who were engaged in such measurements were said to stretch the measuring cord on the earth. Geometry of elementary shapes appears in the literature as early as the Epic of Gilgamesh, circa 2750 BC. The Mesopotamian poetic masterpiece, which is the oldest literary work known to date. The epic implies that down-to-earth mathematics, although divinely motivated, is the province of humans. This attitude was reflected in the training and practices of those engaged in stretching the measuring cord on the earth, who were individuals educated and trained for the appropriate mathematical work without necessarily being members of the priesthood. At the height of its accomplishment, Babylonian geometry included numerous geometric results. The most famous Babylonian mathematical tablet, Plinton 322, dated circa 1800 BC, the figure above, contains sophisticated mathematics bridging between geometry and algebra and touching on results that were believed to have been discovered during the Hellenistic period, hundreds of years later. Its deciphering in 1945 revealed that the text involved 15 Pythagorean triples. None of these results appear with proofs. Most of these advanced geometric results were discovered long after Enheduanna's death. In Enheduanna temple hymn, we are offered a glimpse of the construction that spurred these discoveries. As an example, I'll touch slightly on only one aspect of one type of construction appearing in only one of Enheduanna hymns. Established circa 5400 BC, Eridu was the site of the first temple in Mesopotamia, a temple to god Enki, the god of fresh water from underground aquifers. All Sumerian sources point out that later Mesopotamian temples were founded in conformity with the ordinances and rituals of Eridu, although no text exists that gives any details on what those ordinances and rituals are. Enheduanna temple hymn to E and Gura, house of subterranean sea, the temple of god Enki in Eridu, reflects a number of common features of Sumerian temples, which evolved from construction practices originating in deep antiquity, and therefore are likely to have been part of the ordinances of Eridu. Unir, first ziggurat uniting heaven and earth, foundation of heaven and earth. You stand high on the most holy site, Eridu. Your walls are kept in good repair. Brick to brick firmly joined together, even the light cannot filter into the chamber where your revered Lord dwells. He placed a crown on your head, house without equal. The first stanza mentioned the ziggurat. Unir means house of the ziggurat, the most distinctive feature of Sumerian temples. The ziggurat unites heaven and earth quite literally, starting from a deep foundation that reaches down to the aquifer and rising upward as a step pyramid to the last platform high above, where the chamber where your revered Lord dwells sits on like a crown on your head. The second stanza mentions the construction of the walls of the ziggurat, which are built with kiln-baked clay bricks that were manufactured with mathematical precision. For example, each baked brick used in the construction of the Ur-Nammu ziggurat, circa 2100 BC, measures about 11.5 by 11.5 by 2.75 inches and weighs 33 pounds. The bricks were laid out with equal precision in order to provide a solid and durable wall so that even the light cannot filter into the top chamber where the god statue resided in splendid isolation. Ziggurats increased in number of platforms and elaboration of design, hand in hand with the development of the mathematical and engineering skill required for their construction. I will end this talk with a mystery. Who is the enigmatic true woman whose mathematical responsibility are described in lines 12 and 13 of Temple Hymn 42? The goddess Nisaba and Enheduanna herself, both? We will never know with certainty. In the paper on which this talk is based, I argue that this line describes the responsibility of both goddess and priestess. The paper also includes more details about each of the topics discussed here, as well as my poem Enheduanna, a tribute to this extraordinary true woman. I hope that you enjoyed this talk. I would like to thank the organizing for inviting me to give this presentation, and all of you for listening to it. Thank you.